Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me in another video. So as you can tell based on the title, well today we are talking about Chloé Fall Winter 2024. So I admittedly have never really been a Chloé gal. Of all the hit pieces that have come out, I've never really been that much into them, frankly. She's never really spoken to me from a variety of different eras of creative directors. Even the Phoebe Philo era, I was a little bit too young, or I guess like my style, the brands that I was more so interested in during that time period, it was not that style, even though I vividly remember it, even though I vividly remember Sienna Miller and that era of Boho. My style evolution has never really aligned with Chloé. The only piece that I have in my collection is this necklace. It's this costume jewelry piece, and it's from maybe 3 creative directors ago. Do you remember Boho of the 2000s? I remember Nicole Richie. I remember Sienna Miller. I remember Mary-Kay and Ashley Olsen, right? That 2000s era, like bohemian style that Phoebe Philo under Chloé definitely embodied, as well as in the 2010s, Boho kind of shifted to this Western Americana music festival, blogger Coachella sort of look that we saw. I always think of those Chloé Nile bags and those Susanna boots. Again, not quite my style, but I remember it. And of course, Chloé is this very iconic brand with very iconic creative directors. Even just my lifetime, from like the Stella McCartney to Phoebe Philo and so on and so forth. Chloé has been a very popular brand, but I feel like up until very recently, in particular the late 2010s, 2020s, Chloé hasn't been that popular of a brand. Yes, I remember there were the Woody totes, the Woody line, those sort of like shopper bags with Chloé logos. I saw a lot of people on YouTube unbox those bags. There was a sort of surge in this style, but that's kind of the last sort of mildly popular item, but that I would say was nowhere near the hype around the Chloé Paddington or the Nile or the Susanna boots, and just how those pieces sort of embodied that feminine boho style. Up until recently, Gabriella Hearst was the creative director, and I think she's actually a very great designer. I just don't think she was able to give Richemont, which is the luxury conglomerate that owns Chloé along with other brands like Alaïa, Cartier, Van Cleef, Net-a-Porter, much like these other luxury conglomerates like Kering, LVMH. They want these brands to be commercial successes. I think Gabriella Hearst is a great designer. She had a focus on eco-friendly practices, ethical production. It just didn't quite hit the same as I think other eras at Chloé. And I just also think in general, fashion has kind of shifted away from that sort of bohemian, feminine style, be it how we saw it in the 2000s to the 2010s. The bohemian style really hasn't translated into the 2020s. That's why I think it is quite interesting to see Chemena Kamali. She is going very bohemian, and to her credit, she is a designer who really knows and understands this brand. She's worked under several Chloé creative director eras, be it Phoebe Philo to Claire White Keller. In addition, she's also worked at YSL, and you definitely see the influence of that. So with this recent collection, while this has not been a style that we've seen for quite some time, with this recent collection, Chemena Kamali has decided to go fully into this 1970s boho era, going back to Karl Lagerfeld as the creative director at Chloé, as well as her own experience working at Chloé. For her, this was described as a homecoming. This was her coming back to where she had started, where she was really able to flourish in her fashion career, really able to grow with the different eras at Chloé, as well as someone who knows what the Chloé customer wants from these different eras. And I think that's really important. And with this latest collection, while I wouldn't say this is like 100% my style, I actually think it's a really strong collection. That boho vibe is very much felt, but in less of that Americana boho, and it's more going back to that 1970s Parisian bohemian style. I've always had this appreciation from afar of the style. Paris, especially late 60s, 70s, has always had a soft spot for me. I've made a video on Jane Birkin's style, but another fashion icon of mine is Francois Hardy. There were hints of this show that kind of actually reminded me of some of the earlier Eddie Slimane at Celine collections. I know those collections weren't always really well received by critics. I think those collections are some of the most underrated work he's done. But anyways, this collection was very much that Paris in the 70s. It was very feminine, it was very romantic. I think when we say bohemian or like boho, the way boho is seen in different decades and different years, the way we understand the style up until recently, it is not quite that 2010s era. This 1970s bohemian style that sort of emerged in like the late 60s with these flowing maxi dresses, these sort of peasant blouses, these fringed accents. This was a style that occurred in Paris in the 1970s. Of course, Chloé is renowned for its bohemian-inspired designs, that kind of free-spirited, that ease. Chloé from that era, as well as in this collection, we're seeing use of airy fabrics, earthy tones, very relaxed silhouettes, beautiful blouses. Chemena Kamali stated this: "I think there's this connection where today as a woman, you need to be able to follow your intuition and be yourself. It is very much about an intuitive way of dressing, about lightness, movement, fluidity, and emotion. I also love the power of nostalgia. Where you go backwards, you go forwards. You also think of today and what women want to wear now." This feeling of nostalgia is very much present in the show. We're seeing a lot of the OG Chloé models, it girls, sit front row. We have Pat Cleveland and Jerry Hall, who were Carl's muses from the 70s. We also see Sienna Miller, who famously wore Phoebe Philo in the 2000s. Right beside her was 2000s Chloé model Leah Cabetti. And then we see Alexa Chung, the spanning of these Chloé it girls throughout the decades. Let's take a look at some of these looks. So the first look we saw, we have this model wearing this layered cape silhouette. This is something that we see throughout the collection. We've got this big chunky necklace, and I can't help but feel with that chunky necklace, it just reminds me of the late 2000s to early 2010s. It's very much opposite from that clean girl, dainty, subtle jewelry styling we've been seeing for quite some time. And then of course these sunglasses feel very retro. Personally, these flats don't really do it for me, but I definitely could picture Alexa Chung in 2011. This next look here, we're seeing this lace cape top. What's really bringing me back to this era is the amount of lace. It's very detailed, it's very pretty, but it's also something that is very comfortable and wearable, easy, kind of giving me borderline grandma tablecloth vibes, but I think that's kind of the intention. Something that almost feels vintage. The pants feel very 70s with that flared look. This next look, it's really bringing me back to the late 2000s, early 2010s. Do you remember when people would wear these headpieces, headbands? I don't know, I'm sure I did back in the day, but it was very much that kind of like indie girl kind of thing to do. But I think this is less that, and this is more channeling that 70s bohemian style. When I look at this, I think of someone like Florence and the Machine. What was very interesting, the song, the opening music and closing music was Bat for Lashes, which really brought me back to that era. A lot of these looks to me felt indie girl, Coachella, music festival, female musicians from that era. Like when I think about Bat for Lashes, Florence and the Machine, or early Lana Del Rey, there was definitely hints of that with a lot of this collection. It definitely does give me that like sense of nostalgia for something that we haven't seen in a very long time. When you think about how the it girls dress today, this has just not been the way people have been dressing. There were a few looks that made me feel like this was an interesting fusion of YSL and Phoebe Philo for Chloé. And then this look here, again, going back to that bohemian style, looks like something straight out of Paris 1970s. It has this very defined silhouette, like a lot of repeating elements with the cape, the very flowy, excessive chiffon, these like knee-high boots where the way that they were styled, it was almost the dresses and the tops were like oddly tucked into the boots, kind of gives this rushed heat of the moment kind of look. Another thing that I think is really defining of Chloé as a brand is this sort of romanticism. A lot of these designs have this almost ethereal touch with whimsical details. We'll talk about handbags as well. Sort of softer colors, these very flowing fabrics. They just create this romantic allure. And of course there is this feeling of femininity, and I'm using this in quotations. I think there's just kind of this feminine energy or this feminine attitude. It's just kind of this softness, this gentleness. I feel like a lot of fashion that we've been seeing for a while now has been almost in a way masculine and almost harsh in a way. Very structured, but it's very nice to see these sort of feminine touches, but yet it's very wearable. Chloé has always been a brand that has embraced relaxed, flowing silhouettes, very soft fabrics, very delicate details. Love the ruffles, the lace. These these are kind of key signatures of what makes Chloé Chloé. And going back to this point of female intuition, even just going back to the 70s and under the Carl era, bringing out the femininity and fashion, right? And again, I'm saying feminine in this very quotational way. Perhaps this isn't the right term, but I did find it very interesting in a recent Vogue article. She talks about her time at YSL. I want to go back to that emotional connection to reroute and renavigate Chloé back to this essence and to that soul because it has a very warm soul. My own emotional connection, my own love for Chloé is connected also to Paris. But that spirit stayed with me even when I worked in other places. When I worked at YSL, sometimes I would propose something to Anthony Vaccarello and he would say, oh no, this is just too feminine, it's too soft. Keep that for Chloé. And this is why I'm emphasizing this point. She feels very authentic in her ability to express what she would have been to quote feminine or soft at a brand like YSL, which is known for more of its very sleek, structured, quote masculine silhouettes. There's that famous quote, Chanel freed women, YSL empowered them. And another interesting point in that article when she talked about empowerment, she goes back to the days of the founder and says this: there were all the famous men in Paris. The couturiers and the silhouette looked very different, very sculpted and very structured. She was someone who said, you know what, I want to give a certain lightness and freedom to the clothes so that you can work in them and live your life in them because you have stuff to do. She was working, and when you work, you want to be at ease. You want to be able to move. And I think this is interesting because it challenges the idea of clothing and empowerment. Is feeling empowered a YSL blazer, or is feeling comfortable empowering? The idea that you can feel empowered in something that is lighter and more easy breezy, what is quote feminine, or is feeling empowered wearing a boxy, structured, heavy coat. And I think what's very interesting is when you look at the work at YSL, especially now, and I was really thinking about YSL and how, you know, it's a part of caring. And I thought her bringing up that point about the founder coming into fashion at a time where clothing was more sculpted and sculptural and structured. It's almost very similar to how she's coming into fashion. When we think about YSL, or even just a lot of the brands under caring, right? Like when we think about YSL, Balenciaga, McQueen now, we don't really see from these houses that same softness, lightness, the ease, the comfort, the flowing fabrics. It's something that we haven't seen in fashion expressed in this kind of way for a while. There's some looks that honestly, when I look at them, I can totally picture the cottagecore girls totally being all over this. Something about these lacy, flowy dresses that I could definitely see Chloé appealing to them. This particular look, I know that everyone was talking about the mob wife aesthetic. This big furry look, I think that could equally just be Parisian bohemian. I don't necessarily think fur is exclusive to Italian mob wives. Again, we're seeing a lot of these 70s capes. And another thing that we saw were these moments with plaid. They sort of reminded me of the latest Burberry collection by Daniel Lee. This plaid or sort of check pattern. I don't know if this is like a trend we're seeing now. So now let's talk about handbags. And I think what we're seeing with a lot of the bags and just kind of like these accessories in general is there's hints of playfulness and these kinds of like more whimsical touches. A lot of these bags have these embellished details. There's intricate details. This first bag that we saw, obviously it's reminding me of a lot of the Phoebe Philo era sort of bags, those sort of like bracelet bags. It's definitely worth hunting down if you can find one of these on the pre-love market. You'll probably get them for a really good deal. And this next look here, by the way, I feel like this top, it's really kind of giving me a more opulent version of Kate. I honestly could easily see the customer who loves that kind of stuff at Kate really like loving this. But back to this handbag here, these kind of like chunky hammered gold details. I'm not gonna lie, I do wonder how heavy is this bag, but I think it's cool nonetheless. This was another bag that we saw. These sort of like slouchy satchel bags really remind me of those Proenza Schooler PS bags that they did. And then we also had these really massive hobo bags with these metal accents, very on brand for Chloé. And then there was this also furry hobo, and a lot of these sort of bracelet, slouchy, circular hobo bags, which is definitely a callback to a lot of the Phoebe Philo era creations. So yes, those are the bags, and overall I thought this was a really strong collection. It was very bold. It wasn't trying to appeal to the trends or trying to do another iteration of quiet luxury. I think Chemena Kamali is somebody that truly is a part of the DNA of Chloé, and working for Chloé for years and years under different creative directors, as well as just offering something very different from what we are seeing across the board in fashion, but at the same time is like very true to the brand and true to that designer. I don't think any brand is trying to revive this bohemian style in this kind of way. That Parisian 70s style is something that I haven't really seen for some time. It does make me wonder though, when I see this kind of direction, is Boho really due for a comeback though? I really wonder, is this bohemian style something that customers are desiring? Is there a thirst for this approach to fashion? While in the past 3 years, right, we saw a lot of logomania, we saw maximalism, and of course we've seen quiet luxury and all that. Is Boho something that customers would want? Is Boho due for a resurgence in the way that we saw the Boho sort of style come after Y2K in the 2000s, right? Are we due for this kind of soft, warm, sun-kissed approach to fashion? I think there is something very approachable, and I think it is kind of a nice middle ground between the two extremes in fashion that we have been seeing. While there are very whimsical statement points with this collection, there's also a lot of wearability and comfort and ease that I think a lot of people find very appealing about a more quiet luxury look. I do wonder who would rock this, right? Obviously, when I think about Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen in the late 2000s to Sienna Miller to Pat Cleveland in the 70s, right? Is that kind of energy here in 2024, or is that something that we can see happening? Like I said earlier, I could totally see women that wear Kate and even Celine totally going for this. Maybe that OG Chloé customer from the 2010s, this is gonna inspire her to go back to the brand. Perhaps it could be that as well. I always wonder with these collections, is there gonna be like an it handbag or sort of that like it piece, right? Back in the day, the Chloé Nile bags or the Susanna boots or the Chloé Paddington. Is there the potential for any of these handbags or any of these accessories or even just any of these ready-to-wear pieces? These cape coats, these tops with these elongated sleeves, do these key signature pieces, will they become pieces that people will want to wear on a greater scale? And finally, while we're talking heavily about the change of creative directors, I also think the more you look into these creative director changes, not only has the creative director changed, there is a new CEO in charge. There is a whole business side. There's a whole marketing strategy involved with these major brands. While I think this is a very strong collection, it is just as important that the business side has a strong strategy and knows what they're doing. That is only part of the battle. This is a strong collection. I do think Chloé does have a lot of potential. I think there is a customer base that could find this appealing, but I do think it needs to also be marketed right. I think the vision has to be clear. I actually am excited to see where this brand goes. I really personally have a soft spot for the inspiration for this collection. Personally, as a millennial, there are moments that felt very nostalgic for me, and I imagine women even like older than me, from like the Phoebe Philo days to the Stella days to the Carl days, there are those those moments of nostalgia that women of all ages could feel. I do think this collection is bringing something different from what we are seeing on a lot of these runways today. I'm really personally excited to see how people wear these clothes. We do see sort of a shift towards a more bohemian style, or maybe this is more of a niche style and maybe it's just something for OG Chloé girls to enjoy. So yes, that is my video. Would love to know what are your thoughts with this latest collection. Thank you so much for joining me in another one, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.